Good evening. Tonight, stranded astronauts return to Earth at long last. Is asteroid mining actually making a comeback in the commercial markets? And of course, Elon Musk now says today that an uncrewed starship will head for Mars by the end of next year, plus a whole lot more. From the news desk, the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. Good evening, everyone. As we always ask, what is the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, and why are you here? Well, what do? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups, space scalable SMBs, space adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy across the funding spectrum. Our programs fortify business plans and investor readiness for founding teams at varying levels of development. We have introduced over 90 companies to the world. We've helped fund 27 of them to date. One of our latest initiatives, of course, is our monthly space microgrants, where we award $1,000 to an aspiring startup. The place to go there is spacemicrofund.com. If you want to apply for a microgrant, the form is right there and it's very easy to submit. We also encourage our listeners and fans to help support microgrants. And the bottom of that page is a link button to our support portal, where you get the option of a one-time gift or a monthly subscription. $50 to $100 a month for 6 months or more. It helps a lot of new firms get out of the garage. And of course, there is a small QR code at the upper left of your screen. You can click that as well, or take a picture of it, and you can go where you need to go with our thanks in advance. Joining me now is one of my podcast producers, entrepreneur himself, one of my oldest space friends, Michael Lane from Liftport. Michael, get back here, man.
Hey,
what is up?
How's things?
I'm good. I'm all rested and
back home after
Washington,
D.C.
A week in the belly of the beast. Yes, right. It was a great time, and a lot of good stuff got done. We made a lot of good contacts. A lot of good stuff got done. So it's good I did it. Yeah. I don't have to do it again for another year. So that's even better. We got a lot of news to talk about today. Maybe we should talk about the big story. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams splashed down today. After 8 months stranded in space, they're finally home and in good spirits and lots of smiles. I didn't get to see the actual splashdown on the SpaceX channel, but I didn't get there in time. But I did see the craft pulled out of the ocean and onto the deck of the recovery ship, and I got to see live the all the astronauts come out of the capsule. So that was kind of fun. And yeah, I just sent some screenshots that I took. I know one of them is of okay, that's there she is, Sumi Williams. Yeah. I'm really happy to be home at long last, and that was a great moment. All those guys were great. At minimum, those first two guys that came back, Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov from Roscosmos, they were up there 171 days. Mm-hmm. And they did like 900 hours of science and a whole bunch of they literally 900 hours of science. That's crazy. A lot of science to do up there. And that's why they send these guys, because they work them to death doing science to justify the tremendous cost of running the ISS. And it's all good stuff, and it's very useful material. And Butch and Suni also did a whole lot of stuff. They became a part of the crew and did a lot of great things. But it was just sad that they were stuck up there, and now they're home. And so that was a great day today on that. Michael, I know you had something. There was something that happened as a result of one of our shows. I thought you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, I do. I'll show some stuff here in a second. But, a couple weeks ago, we had a rather surprising guest on our show, Dr. Mark Levinson. And he wrote the book, The Box, and he was confused. Why am I on this show? Right. And we had some talks beforehand and afterwards. He's like, I'm not a space guy. I'm a historian. I'm an economist. What am I doing here? I'm like, trust me, we know why you're here, even if you don't. Right. And the conversation was pretty interesting. Sean, if you can find the link and post it, it was a really cool discussion. We talked for about maybe 20 minutes even after the show, which was also interesting. And here's this PhD who tracked the history of developing the containerization standards that we now take for granted in the global economy. And so we, Tom and I and other people, are saying, this industry needs those standards in order to for the industry to progress. And he said something. Thanks, Sean. The link is in the chat there. He said something was really profound to us. He's like, it used to be that all this cargo is handled one-on-one, each individual bag of rice or beans or whatever it is, each car individually hand-loaded. And then when we containerize things, more capital came into the industry, and the industry fundamentally changed, and the world changed. And, here, Tom and Sean and I were scribbling, we're taking notes. So because of that, Dr. Doug Plata runs the Space Development Network, and he decided to organize just this ad hoc meeting, not really ad hoc, but this loose working group meeting. And that was really great. And so, we were expecting kind of a low attendance, so just, 3, 4, 5 people. Turned out it was 14, 15 people. All were interested in this topic. And we had an hour and a half conversation with it. We've decided that we're going to meet again in 2 weeks. And we're looking to maybe host an event, a workshop, a formal workshop at ISTC in June. So a lot happened out of that. I'm just going to throw up a super quick screen capture. One of the guys working on it created this document using a bunch of AI inside the box. Dad joke. Of course, that had to happen. One of the guys, Eric Bethke, created this kind of on-the-fly document using AI. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a standard, but in just a few hour and a half, 90 minutes, we came up with 13 pages of really useful content out of that meeting. So I think there's more to this story. It's definitely developing. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's really cool that Tom's show, The Unknown Quantity, surfaced this idea because it's been around for a little while, but talking about being a catalyst, having the Space Development Network jump in with their network, and then as we build it to the National Space Society. One of the people on the call was Dr. Jeffrey Liss. He is on the board of directors of the National Space Society. So in just a very short amount of time, just 3 weeks, it went from this fringe idea to at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen people wanting to work on this. There's some business opportunities out there. There's a consortium idea out there. There's something's going to happen. Yeah. So thanks, Tom, for being a catalyst for this.
I'm tickled over that. It's just I think, something really big has started right here on this show, and we were a part of it,
right?
And are still a part of it. I think that's great. Well, the thing is that everybody kind of said, well, I don't know, are we the ones to set standards? I don't know if we have, well, who's more qualified than anybody? I mean, I mentioned to Michael before the show, I was in IT for a very long time, way too long, probably. And I was back in the halcyon days when everybody was fighting over stuff. And so standards emerged over time and they change over time. That's how it starts. Standards start from the ground up. They're not imposed by some, authoritarian cabal up there somewhere, because that doesn't exist at the time you're doing these things. When I was learning IT stuff, I learned it out of a book because there were no classes. Actually, our friend and our favorite fan, Morty, is here. And he asked, isn't it still too early for space standards? Well, no, we've had certain standards for docking hatches for 50 years at this point that we're still working from. So no, it's not too early to start standards. You can start having the conversation, which is what we're doing. Because sooner or later, there's going to be a bunch of commercial activity, and people are going to want to ship a bunch of stuff up there for fun and profit, and it'd be more stuff going up there than is coming back. And so you have to use whatever mechanisms you have to try and fuse those two together. And that's not hard, because it seems to me, when you're working, if you're just working space to space, you might have an entirely different kind of system for moving stuff around. They might be, giant toroid donut looking things that fit inside an opened up starship, and and it fills as much of the space you can possibly fill. And in microgravity, something like that works. But you don't build that and install it and try to put it in a gravitational field on the ground. It's just not going to work. And so you have to use what you have. People are shipping stuff from wherever, putting it in some other container, putting that container on a rocket and sending it somewhere. And so, so you work with the standards that you have. And if you have to make modifications to make that work even better, well, this is what engineers do. Yeah.
One of the things, Morty, that came out of that conversation was looking at the 40-foot boxes that became the standard for the ocean-going vessels. By the way, 11,000 boxes can fit on one of the big ships. And as a result of coming up with a standard for the boxes, it also changed the standard for the ships, and also it changed the standard for the Panama Canal, right? Like, by creating the standard that everybody could rely upon, it changed the whole industry. So, in fact, Morty, I think it's overdue to have a standard, not too early. Well, but we're happy to invite you to the working groups, because I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be.
As Morty asked, though, rockets are still changing drastically. Well, not as drastically as you might think. I mean, obviously, Starship is a drastic change over what we've had before, and will ultimately be a successful one. And that's another topic here coming up. But, if you really want to keep the standards that you have, let's build a square rocket. Let's build something that's a rectangular shape with edges on it, and things will fit in there and you won't waste an inch. The only guy I know who built a square rocket was a guy named Lutz Kaiser back in the 1970s. And so, no one's done that since. No one's even attempted it since. It was a bizarre design anyway. Wow. It was fun to watch, but it is like, okay. Not very aerodynamic.
Let's get back to the news so we can get on to our guest. What else you want to talk about?
Okay, well, let's see. Is asteroid mining making a comeback? That's a good question. There was an article in a Space Review just the other day that showed how a couple of newer companies are trying to come in and apparently try to accomplish something that, something that planetary resources couldn't do.
This was kind of wild. First of all, I like a guy who kind of like swears in public, because I'm that kind of guy. And so he's got a couple. I was scared, kind of quotes. But this one, sorry, I lost it. Here we go. I am expletive terrified.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's Astro Forge. And they were, but they're actually doing an asteroid recon mission. They started from scratch from the outset when they opened the door to build a mission and build it quickly. The other companies like Deep Space Industries and Planetary Resources, they were more big picture guys, and they were trying to plan a whole system and try to make it work.
Right.
And these guys said they're skipping all that and they're just going to build some hardware and fly it and see what happens.
Right.
Which I like.
Yeah. Feeling good is the first sign that then there was another quote in here that was brilliant. Give me a second. There's a lot in here. Basically, it's like Planetary Resources didn't have the balls to do it. I mean, it was just straightforward, like
shredding them.
Nice try, guys.
But you know what?
Here we go. Here we go. It was better to try and fail fast, to use a term bandied around by many startups, than it was to wait for years for perfect spacecraft. We've got to go for it. I respect Planetary Resources a lot, but they didn't have the balls to try. We've got the balls to try. Hopefully our brains are good enough to pull it off. I gotta say, I really respect that kind of thinking, that kind of put it all out there and try. And you know, sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes you get all the way to the moon and your lander tips over on its side. Like sometimes that just happens. And this kind of courage, I think, is the kind of barnstorming courage it takes to get into space for real. So hats off to
absolutely. They're looking on mining metallic asteroids for precious metals. There's another early stage company doing the similar thing, but they're looking for other called Carmen Plus. And those guys are looking for other classes of asteroids that have hydrated minerals. They want to mine those and extract water. And so that's something they're working on. I am trying to go. They haven't. I'm looking for their.
Are you looking for?
I'm looking for these guys. No, I'm not looking for a quote. I want to be. I want from kind of money they raised. I'm not seeing it. So.
Oh no, they're not. They haven't really disclosed that kind of stuff yet. We don't really have a good picture of that yet. Not that I'm aware of.
Congress is still skeptical of all this, of course, but. But at least it's at least one representative, Paul Gosar from Arizona. He's the chairman of a subcommittee on this, and he said what seems like a far off concept is no longer so. Resource extraction in space is right around the corner. Now, and then the other thing I picked up, I think you picked up on it too, Michael. It's still the debate still rages on about how much is the moon in America's future, and there's a lot of discussion about that. And the woman who wrote that, Bhavya Lal, she basically says, I like this little part. The moon versus Mars debate presents a false choice. Modern launch capabilities and commercial innovation enable a more nuanced approach, using the moon as a proving ground while simultaneously developing Mars-specific technologies. And actually, that parallel development strategy could accelerate progress toward both destinations. So that was for me, that was the takeaway from that article.
So Dr. Lal, for those who don't know, very storied career at MIT, got pulled into the last administration, ran most of the science work at NASA for, I think, 3 years, and then went back to academia. I met her briefly once, but no anecdotes or stories about that. But pretty fascinating. And there's this article at Space Review, and then the very same day, a different article at Space News, which I thought was really fascinating. And it says a lot of the same things, but they do say it a little bit differently. Um, you know, it's fine to put the flag on Mars. We should be doing that. This is kind of taking a look at the, the story behind the story, if you will. I'll put all the links here in a second. And then at the same time that's happening, Tom and I's old, I'm going to call it alma mater, the Space Frontier Foundation, issues their letter, which I thought I had queued up, and apparently I do not. I'm sure I do. Where is it? So talk a little bit more, Tom, about, oh, here we go. That's not sharing anything. I thought I was sharing something.
Well, sometimes you can share and sometimes you can't, There it is. There it is.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So the Center for Space Commerce and Finance came out of and did its initial first work under the Space Frontier Foundation. So we've been a fan of these folks for a long time. And just today, they issued this letter to the House as testimony, saying, "Look, we should be doing this stuff. We're already first in launch. We should be first in development. We should be first to the moon. We should be first to Mars, and that it's a dual track system that makes America first again." So, these three things all happened within about 48 hours. I don't know if it's a coordinated plan, but certainly there's a lot going on that says Moon and Mars, and that's important. So I like all of it kind of happening.
Well, speaking of that, there's actually one more thing that happened just I think yesterday in that same topic. Elon Musk announced that an uncrewed starship with one of his robots on it will be heading for Mars by the end of next year.
Yeah,
what do you think? Will you do it?
Astounding. SpaceX, I was trying to separate the man and the myth from the company. So I don't have a lot of confidence in Musk as a human being, but I have a lot of confidence in SpaceX as a company, right? I have a lot of confidence in Gwen Shaw,
absolutely,
specifically.
She's the one that runs the place. So
Musk is like batting 1,000 on making a prediction, missing it by a mile, but then the engineers come back along and try to, make good on his promises. And I think that's what's happened here, right? So are they going to launch to Mars next year? I would be really skeptical. Hopeful. I'll remain hopeful, but I would be really skeptical based on their track record. Now, does that mean SpaceX is going to put a lot of effort into it? Yeah. And when SpaceX decides to do something, they tend to succeed.
Keep in mind, not that many years ago, I think it was 2018, on the first launch of the Falcon Heavy, the payload was a Tesla with a dummy in it in a spacesuit.
Never gonna forget that one.
It was supposed to go to Mars. And in fact, it didn't get to Mars. Instead, it was such a fast trajectory, it overshot Mars by a long ways. It was heading for the asteroid belt. I don't know where it is now or if it's anywhere, but it was, so when he did that, I thought, well, maybe he had reason to say, yeah, we're going to shoot something to Mars because I've already done it once.
Right.
Right.
So that's a good argument.
There you go. Okay. We're going to move ahead. And where we're doing another subtle reminder, our little donation screen is right up there in the upper left corner of your screen. If you can, we could sure use the help for funding our micro grants and a lot of other things that we do here at the center. But we have a very, very interesting guest tonight, and I'm going to bring him on right now. Our guest is, and he fits right into all this. He's a media guy, and he's been involved in space forever, and there he is. And it's great to see him. We know this guy, and we love this guy. Our guest is Rod Pyle. He's author of 20 books on space, a journalist, public speaker, a former TV producer, an educator. He's done it all. Right now he's the editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine, which is a print and digital quarterly published by the National Space Society. His books are all nonfiction books, and he co-authored 4 public reports for NASA's JPL at one time. He hosts his 2 podcast series. He's got one going right now, and he's a frequent guest on national and regional radio. And as a space expert, and boy, he is. And we just love having you on. I'm just so glad you did. You're so out there a guy. You do so many great things. I just thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight, Rod. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. And I'm one of those West Coast multi-hyphenates that usually just means you have ADHD, but it allows you to open and then close a lot of doors on your way out. That's for sure.
Yeah, before they slam. I don't know.
So does anybody but me think that the newest iteration of Starship, which has failed twice, is kind of the Cybertruck of flight? It kind of works, but it's just not getting there all the way. I don't know how many Cybertrucks you guys have seen, but we see them all over Southern California.
Well, I've seen a lot of them on fire lately. I don't know.
Well, I was going to say a lot of people are wrapping them now, so they don't look quite as Cybertruckish. And I've even seen a couple with Toyota on the back and stuff. Nice try. But it's like, close, but you're not quite there yet. And I mean, like you guys, I want him to succeed. I don't like him anymore, but I want him to succeed because it's good for us as a species and all that. Endless admiration for Gwynne Shotwell.
Right.
I never actually spent time talking to Elon, but I interviewed Gwynne for my Space 2.0 book. And I was sitting around, I was waiting in the boardroom, quote unquote, at SpaceX in Hawthorne. And I was looking at the table, which I thought was, from 3 feet away, I thought, wow, that's really nice flecked marble. And then I realized it was just a big piece of plywood with black spray paint that was all gouged up from people dropping parts on it. So Gwynne comes in, sits down and says, "So you're the space nerd, huh?" Thought, okay. So we do the interview, and we're talking for about 20 minutes, supposed to have a half an hour. And then I feel something weird, and I see her look over like this, and Elon is just outside the windows, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. And he's on about something, She said, "Oh, gotta go!" Boom, out the door. I thought, man, lady, you have my admiration and my sympathy at that moment. But you can't argue with the results. I just hope that they can get one of these things to fly pretty soon before the FAA says.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, all right. So, what's your take? We just took bets here a minute ago. Is it going to launch to Mars next year? Crystal ball. Pull out your crystal ball.
I don't think so. Well, I mean, we have to make orbit first, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, my question, and I've read 2 versions of this. One says yes, one says no. Does that departure for Mars need orbital refueling? Because if it does, I don't see it happening. If it doesn't, because it's going to be a one-way trip in this case.
Right.
Maybe. But he's trying to land, right?
Yeah. If it's a landing, I don't see any possible way. If it's a get to orbit and take pictures or some sort of recon mission, I would give him a shot if they were going to have a recon mission. I think that's at least possible.
And I'd respect him if he just crashed there, honestly.
I would. I would.
Got there. Yeah. But I mean, as you guys pointed out, he's kind of done this with Falcon Heavy, which, man, I got to tell you, best PR moment of the 21st century.
Oh, for sure.
When that fairing opened, that perfect David Bowie music and that beautiful Tesla Roadster with the road dude in there on the Pacific Coast Highway cruising. I just thought, this has got to have had the kind of impact on young people today that Apollo did in my generation.
I hope so. Yeah.
I've mentioned before, maybe even in print, that I felt like that day, I think it was February 6, 2018. Yeah. And when you saw the 2 side rockets come down at the same time, I thought, okay, folks, this is when the 21st century actually began.
Right.
That's true. And the difference between that and what we saw in the 1960s with Apollo was that within 10 minutes of those two side boosters landing, people were on Facebook and Twitter and other places saying, oh, it's fake. It's fake. I saw the computer generated footage. That's not real. And I thought,
Yeah.
grab me a conspiracist and a flounder that I can slap him in the face with. That's just me. This is like I do Coast to Coast AM every now and then because,
right.
all that stuff is kind of the gateway drug to what we're doing. So, so we love those people. But man, that second hour when the calls come in, we never flew to the moon.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
There's
yeah.
nothing to push against in space. It's like,
Right. Right.
But
the flat. Thanks to the interwebs, the flat Earth people have gotten a new lease on life.
yeah, my favorite was the lady that called in and said, "I want to talk to your guest tonight about a bright light I saw over my house." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I'm thinking maybe it's Venus or a plane or the usual suspects. And she says, "What was really interesting was it started talking to me with the voice of Buzz Aldrin."
Oh, jeez.
What do you say? Well, that's interesting. I mean, Buzz is a pretty omniscient guy, but that might be reach even for him. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm steering this way off the rails.
That's okay.
Let's talk about what you guys want to talk about.
Wait, because I got a story here. Wait a second.
Here we go.
So, Rod, you didn't really know me when I was doing most of the space elevator stuff, but Tom's been seeing this for 25 years.
Long time. I've been watching a long time. I'm still waiting.
Got the missing teeth to prove it.
I would get regularly invited to UFO conferences and Bigfoot conferences, and I would get people would send me random business plans on faster than light communications.
Perpetual motion?
Right, absolutely. Oh, yeah. The ones that I really liked were if space is a vacuum, what you really need is a big straw, and then you can just put the cars into the straw, and the vacuum of space will pull it straight up. Those are super fun.
Now, you sure it wouldn't work?
I am.
Okay, just checking.
You always had those things in the hospitals for years. You had the tube with the thing in it. And you put it in that vacuum system. They're like,
out. This is
you guys are making me think of catheters, and I'm having a very uncomfortable moment here.
All right. Let's move back to the topic du jour.
Let's steer it back. It's all about you. We're talking about you.
Because... Let's make one comment on the whole alien culture.
Okay.
So for years, I was like...
With your background that you have, like...
right.
Back. Yeah, okay. All right.
Mr. Wacko here.
Yeah.
For years, I'd get asked to go on, most of us that have been in this for a while get invitations to do Ancient Aliens at some point. And for years, I'd kind of go, no thanks, But then finally, I did a show, it was the on-camera, voice of reason or whatever.
Yeah.
Called William Shatner's Unexplained. So I was there to be the staff skeptic, So that was a lot of fun. Well, it turned out that same company, and it was a really good experience. I mean, I used to produce that stuff, so I know what a bad experience looks like. So it was a good experience. So I thought, I said, you were the Ancient Alien guys. He goes, yeah. And I said, okay. So next time they asked, I said yes. So I did a bunch of those. And that was fun. Every now and then they try to steer you. It's funny because the producer who was interviewing me is asked these questions, and he kind of steered it towards, what was your first alien experience? And he went, okay, got me. But the point of the story is then about a year and a half ago, I got invited to speak at Alien Con.
Oh, cool.
Alien Con was in Pasadena.
Yeah.
And, when we do the ISDCs, you guys have been there, the International Space Development Conference, we get between 900 and 1,200 people.
Right.
About 40% of those are kids from India and Romania. So, adults, maybe 600 people.
Cool.
It's good.
Yep.
Alien Con, 10 to 12,000 people at the Pasadena Convention Center. The main auditorium in that center only holds 3,300 people, and they were hanging from the rafters when they wheeled in what was left of Eric von Daniken to kind of grunt yes and no questions about answers about his book.
Okay.
But I have to say, walking around the exhibit areas with the people with the little dangly things in their head and all that, But I went into my talk and I had maybe 300 or 400 people there. And, I was expecting Rotten Tomatoes coming up on the stage.
Right.
They
Yeah.
were smart. They were with it. They were polite. They got it. They asked intelligent questions. And I, smacked me down and called me a loser. I thought, wow, these people really. So, it's
Right.
an interesting mixed culture there that we need not to dismiss too easily. It's tempting, but.
I was regularly. Oh, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah, I always have one question. I know we have a lot of stuff we want to cover with you,
Yeah.
Rod, but I have to ask, since we're on that topic, I'm going to ask one thing. ISDC last year,
Yeah.
we in LA, we had a lot of Trek people in there participating. I'm wondering if you have any kind of interesting little tidbits or inside stories you could share.
Actually, so I worked on Trek for 4 years before their time. This is back in the Deep Space Nine era.
Yep.
So I got to know kind of the machine, and it is a machine. I mean, it's the franchise that just won't die. When you go on the Paramount lot, the execs will say, okay, this half was built by Cheers and this half was built by Star Trek. Which half do you want to go to?
Yeah.
So I kind of knew a little bit about them, but mostly through their forebears. They were really so. Melissa Navia was the host of the thing. She's the ensign on Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds, yes.
Yeah, and she was splendid. I mean, not only was she good on stage, and she was walking into something she didn't really know much about, admittedly, but she was polite. She would stop and talk to fans and sign paperbacks and body parts or whatever else they wanted to do.
Right.
And she was just welcoming and anything you guys need. Sure, you want me to? You don't always get that. I mean, I love William Shatner, but if you push him too hard, he's like, you'd pay for that. So, and I get that. I respect that. But she was great. Her people were great. I think people really enjoyed it. Did we get the full value of having a sci-fi person as a host? That I don't know. Now, 2019, were you there in 2019? Either of you?
Yeah.
In LA?
Yep.
We had the people from The Expanse there. I mean,
yes,
this was the ISDC's and the NSS's biggest moment in history.
Right. Yeah.
When Jeff Bezos is on stage being interviewed, and he says, "Excuse me one moment," picks up his phone and goes, okay, puts it down. Staged, right? Yeah. And he says, is the cast of The Expanse here? And they were guests, so they were down at a table of honor in the front. He said, I just want to let you know we're renewing your show. And they were tears and all that.
Oh, yeah. The crowd went wild.
Oh, my God. I mean, I at that point, I wasn't that big a fan, but even I'm pretty case hardened, but I was like, that's pretty cool. And I knew, I didn't know. I suspected it was probably staged, but it just worked. And what a great moment. Yeah. So I would like to see more integration of Star Trek or sci-fi in the conference in general, because I feel like these two communities, they're kind of like England and the U.S., two great powers separated by a common language. It feels kind of like sci-fi and what we do is very similar. And how many people do you know in this trade that didn't read Robert Heinlein if they were of a certain age, or they're not reading The Expanse now?
Right. Yeah.
So we got to wrap our arms around that.
I used to be a regular guest at Dragon Con, not the big Comic-Con down in San Diego, but the gigantic one in Atlanta. And I mean, in my normal life, I'm a pretty normal, dull guy. But when I go to Dragon Con, I'm like a rock star, right? Yeah. It's pretty cool being me sometimes, right? It's rare. I mean, I don't get that in my normal life, but when I go to Dragon Con, those communities are great.
And that's such a good point. If you're a TV writer, producer, or book writer in LA, there's 5 more of you, lying passed out in front of the liquor store down on Hollywood Boulevard. We're just as boring as library paste.
Right.
But I used to do a conference in Des Moines for a friend of mine, and they're like, "Are you an author?"
Right.
Yeah, isn't everybody at this point? Yeah. They're like, "Oh, can I touch your?"
Right.
It's nice when it happens.
It is. Yeah. The well, there's a longer story, but it was super fun. Like, there's real actual I'm not going to name them, but they're names you would know. There's real actual movie stars and TV stars in the car behind me, or in the I'm in the front seat. It's not quite a limo, but it's like a gigantic SUV, and we're all getting picked up from the airport, and we're all being shuttled out to the hotel, and our rooms are comped and all that. And there's like really serious actors and actresses in the car behind me. I'm just happy to be in the dang car, right?
We're just
right?
happy not to have to take the bus from the airport
Right.
to the hotel. Right?
And so they're going
Thank
around
you.
there. They all know each other. They're all introducing themselves,
Yeah.
and some are
Yeah.
writers and some are actors. And the driver, he's like, who are you? Like, why am I picking you up? You're nobody. And I'm like, oh, I do space research. Like, I never tell people I'm the space elevator
Right.
guy, not in the first few minutes. And I do space research. Oh, what do you do? Oh, and the guy's like, you're the space elevator guy? And he almost drives into another car. Like, it was crazy. And all the other people behind me are like, what is this? Like, what? Anyway, it was really weird. It was kind of that bizarre moment. I don't mean to pull time away. This is all about you. So
I love this stuff.
As our producer is like, hey, stay on track here. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. But like, we are, the three of us are so lucky to be in this field when we're literally get to build the future. Like, this whole industry is building the future. And Rod, you've been a part of it for decades here. This show is about the money of space. I sent you that message earlier.
Right.
You don't usually get those kind of conversations. How does someone be in this industry as an entrepreneur with 20 books and stick with it and just do the dang job? How does that happen?
It's easy. And I give this answer frequently at book workshops and things. People say, how can I be a successful author? And I usually answer by saying, learn to be happy with 50% of your existing income and you could do okay. So up through 2012-ish, I was still working in TV and making six figures plus. And then I thought, I can't stand this anymore. The documentary TV thing had sort of ground to a halt. It's kind of come back since then. And the shows I was getting offered were like Honey Boo Boo and Vegas Jail and stuff like that. And I thought, I can't do that.
Right.
The space thing was over. And they would ask you to tell the whole Apollo program in 44 minutes, which you can't do. So I'd written my first book in 2005 and came to understand that they just gave you an assignment and left you alone for a year. Well, for ADHD kids, it's like, oh boy, I could sit in the corner and spaz out for hours a day on this. It was a guilty pleasure. So I made that transition, and it was pretty lean for a while. And that was when, at that point, you could get, for a first book, you could get in advance between $35,000 and $40,000. So if you did two of those a year, you were doing all right.
Yeah.
Now, with multiple titles, unless you're in a different genre, but in the space vertical, which is about that wide, you're lucky to get 10 or 15, and oftentimes less. And then you're counting on royalties, if any. And I've gotten lucky with that a couple of times, but usually they're pretty slim, So that's why I picked up Ad Astra, editing Ad Astra magazine in 2017. And we were very fortunate. It didn't earn me any extra money, unfortunately, but we were fortunate that we were able to get it back on the bookshelves in retail across the U.S. and Canada. Now we're being sent out to 110,000 libraries worldwide. And what's really weird is, so it was coming along, sales are going up. We were getting more exposure. And I mean, for me, the big thing, I support the NSS, obviously, but my big goal was let's just get more mind share, with this. Well, at the same time, virtually every other regularly printed space magazine went away. So at this point, we're kind of the last men standing. So, hey, success by any metric, I'll take it.
Right.
So that's really what made it work. In terms of the commitment, it was honestly, I was casting a show years ago, and I got talking to this actor, and he was really good. And I said, what did you do? You kind of came to acting in midlife. He said, yeah. I said, what did you do before? He said, I was a U.S. attorney. I was like, what? And now you're starving as an actor? Because he was.
Right, yeah.
He'd done one movie at that point, Psycho Cop, I think. And he was really good, like I said. And I said, how did you make that change? He said, it's the only thing that made sense. And that kind of stuck in my head, because I think for a lot of us in the space trade, most of us of a certain age have done something else or a bunch of something else's. But we're all sitting here today because it's the only thing that makes sense to us, I suspect. Well, except for Tom. He's got rich. But for the rest of us, he's not even going to make a face at that.
What do you want me to say? You see the background, okay? So I sleep on that place
want
half
you to
the
prove
time
it
in this
disprove it.
office.
Yeah.
So,
Get it.
and what happened to my cat? Oh, he disappeared. Anyway, I did want to ask one thing. It's about your productive output and how you do it. What's your strategy for writing stuff like this? You've written 20 books. You published 3 of them in a single year.
4
in a single year. How do you do it?
So that was a weird confluence. I started working on that package in 2016. 2 of them were and published them in 2019. So 2 were with Prometheus Books. It was the first multi-book deal they had made because they're very cost effective, you might say. So I knew I had a 2-book deal there. So that was like the baseline. Then Space 2.0, I had been shopping that around, have an agent, thank God. And we were just, we were getting close with a bunch of publishers. They were all kind of, well, we don't really know if this new space thing is going anywhere and who's this Elon Musk guy and all this, because it was 2016. So finally, Stan Rosen over at the NSS said, look, let's talk to them about putting some money into this. And they did. So they basically paid for my time for not very much, but for a couple of years, and that helped that get done. And the last one was an Apollo 11 coffee table picture book. And, how many of those have you seen? How many more will you see?
Oh, yeah.
We're coming up on the 50th anniversary.
Right.
There's 2 on my shelf right now.
But I talked to the publisher in the UK and I said, wait, was that? Yeah, it was Sterling. So they were American. So I talked to Sterling and said, look, if we can get this out 3 or 4 months before everybody else does, we're going to do fine. If you get it out in the month of the 50th anniversary, it's going to tank. Right. So they were good to their word, and it sold, 60 or 70,000 copies, which
really
is not bad.
Yeah.
Because those kind of books usually do well on the anniversary event and on Christmas and Father's Day when people can't think of what else to get the old man, right? Get him one of those weird moon books he likes.
Right, yeah.
So that's kind of the business side of it. And I've got a good agent, so he's very aggressive about better royalty rates and all that. They're still tiny, but, it's something. And as far as the getting it done, I have an odd sleep schedule, so I'll get in this cycle where I'll sleep 4 hours and then get up and write for 4, and then go back to bed and then get up and write for 3. And this is only if I'm in like dire book production mode and the deadline is looming in a month. But it's really just, I guess, if you love it, it's like you sort of settling into warm water. You get into that zone of writing, and there's just nothing better. I guess I had a big shot of morphine once. I was having a terrible lower GI problem, and this doctor in Berkeley, of course, said, you're going to feel better in just 30 seconds. He had this big syringe and he punched me. He said, don't get used to this, but it was like my body was filled with liquid sunshine. And that's the closest I can come to what it's like when you get in that zone, Yeah. And I mean, we all have it. You guys have it. There's something that does that for you. And why would you do anything else?
Yeah.
That's one of the nice things about being older, though. My son's 30, and I'm watching him work his hiney off to make a good living, and he does. But, as much as we like to think, kids these days, all they do is complain, it is harder for them, I think.
It is.
Although they don't have to go to the library and pull out that 4-foot drawer with the cards in it.
Right.
That's
the one thing we could give them that we didn't have.
That and portable music. I think I'm older than you guys. So when I was a kid, I was telling a group of kids that I was giving a talk, and I said, when I was your age, there was no such thing as portable music. And they're like, what? Even transistor radios.
Well, there were little transistor radios with a one earpiece that you could stick in there.
That was flesh colored.
Yeah.
Gross.
That one. Yeah. We had that.
Yeah.
and dial phones. No, I think we're about the same age. Maybe
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. I know. Michael's younger. He's a Gen Xer.
He's a child.
He
He still has a little bit of dark in his
Little
beard.
bit.
Lucky
Oh,
devil.
I know. I don't even.
It's less than it was. Trust me.
Yeah, of course. Let's not start on the hair.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
not
and you
talk
know, when
about
it
that.
starts to go, it just
Yeah.
accelerates, doesn't
I
it?
got this little
Yeah.
thing now, so that
Yeah.
helps a lot.
That's good.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So you haven't lost any hair; it's just moved back.
It's just some of it has moved back.
Yeah.
That's what's
Migrated.
I can live with
Yeah.
that.
Are you do you publish your own? Are you your own publisher, or do you have a publishing house? You have an agent.
I have an agent. So far, everything I've done has been through traditional publishers.
Okay.
And I started that way because that's what everybody did then, unless you were with a so-called vanity press and ended up with 3,000 of your own books in your garage that you couldn't get rid
Right.
of. I may switch that up in the coming future. I am involved in a publishing venture that is sort of in stealth mode now. It will never be big. It's always going to be highly specialized space titles. But yeah, so-called hybrid publish. So nowadays, if you go out and you pitch your book, usually it would take us like 6 months to sell a book off a proposal. The last one, which I'm working on now, took 2 years
Oh,
because the industry just keeps getting more and more cautious because Amazon's destroying it for everybody.
right.
And I mean, I love what they do with digital publishing, but in terms of traditional publishing, they're doing a real number on it. But the numbers are much better. So if you've got the moxie to do your own marketing and maybe a network like what you guys are doing here
Right,
to
yeah.
get the word out,
Yep.
you could take home between 35 and 70% of the take from cover price, which is a whole lot better than the 8
Yeah.
to 12%, or nowadays 5 to 8% for a lot of publishers.
Right.
You get off the net.
Right. Not
So, yeah. So if cover price is $20,
right.
you're getting $1 off that $10 net.
Oof.
That's better than a kick in the face, but
But
it ain't half,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think many people are shopping movie rights for the kind of books I write, so that's probably not in the cards. I got one TV deal, but nothing else.
Yeah.
You've got a science fiction background. Do you ever write any science fiction?
I love my fans, and because I love my fans, I do not write fiction because I've tried. I've written 3 screenplays, all of which were very logically ignored.
Okay.
I've written a number of short stories, which people thought were okay, but I just don't have that gift. There's an author I know named Jonathan Mayberry, who's kind of he's a USA Today, New York Times best-selling thriller author, and when I hear him talk, I feel like my Labrador hearing somebody lecture on calculus when he talks about story arcs and character and all that. I admire the hell out of him, but I really don't understand it the way he does.
Mm-hmm.
So, I understand just enough of fictional storytelling to be able to shove it into the nonfiction side where it's a little rarer so I can look pretty good. But if
Okay.
I did it on the fiction side, people would be like, what's this?
Oh.
So,
All right. Okay.
so thanks
Okay.
for asking, but not
But
going
no,
there.
but pass. Okay.
Maybe
Well,
after
yeah.
retirement,
Yeah.
if ever.
Let me ask you about that because you've been around the Hollywood scene, you've met a whole bunch of people,
Yeah.
and you've seen a lot of stuff, and you're a fan, boy, I'm sure, of sci-fi and a lot of good things.
Yeah.
So I am too. I'm wondering, what do you think about the quality of the stuff that's coming out lately? Because sometimes I ask you this because sometimes I see stuff that's just wretched, and they keep cranking it out with the same formulaic bullshit, year after year after year. I thought, I've got 2,000 books on my shelf by incredible sci-fi authors going back
Why
decades.
can't you guys
I
do
could
that
pick
stuff?
any one of those off the shelf, and that would make a better movie than what you just gave me this week.
So I was in visual effects at a very interesting time. I started on Deep Space Nine, and we were still using physical models. And you had them on a rail, and the camera ran past them, and you did 9 passes, and then you had to put them together and do a phaser pass, a lights pass, and a this pass, and that pass. It was really time-consuming and expensive, which is why you spent so much time watching the captain bouncing in his chair during fight scenes, because they were expensive. Then after that, so I left there, and then in 2000 and 2001, I opened a company to do the previs work for Battlestar Galactica reboot. So we had a render farm that we put together of 20 high-end PCs, and we're sitting there cranking out a frame an hour or something. But it was like, how are we going to see these ships in the show? So that was over on the CGI side. So we made that transition, and then I got out of it. So I had the bad sense to watch Moonfall a year and a half ago or so.
No.
Which could pretty much be summarized by two despondent astronauts who hate their lives, have lots of drinks, steal a space shuttle, and find the moon is filled with bees, you know?
Right.
I mean, what a horrible film. And I thought, that, but so many, even the newer Star Wars films, and please hold the hate mail,
Right.
these guys, the producers and production teams, just fall in love with digital effects to the point that it feels like I'm in the middle of a video game.
Yeah.
And the storytelling suffers. Now, occasionally you see something really good. Like, I wasn't the hugest fan of Interstellar, but I thought it was made really well, where they have restraint to use it well. And it really pays off, although a lot of that was physical models, too. He was one of the last holdouts.
Well, yeah, but interestingly on that one, the biggest FX expense they had was that rendering of what they thought a black hole looked like.
Yeah.
And that was done actually from real science and real equations and real high-end stuff by real guys who know what they're talking about.
Kip Thorne.
And they mixed all this together and translated it, pixel by pixel almost into this thing that turns out to be especially I guess an incredibly accurate representation of what to humanize a black hole might look like.
And yet, in the middle of all that, we had to have Matthew McConaughey and who was the other big star in it? Not Brad Pitt. Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, yeah.
Have a 20-minute bar fight on the ice planet. It's like, what the hell is this all about?
Right. Yeah.
And then, at the end, I have to say, I come from the space age, okay? Astronauts don't cry.
Right.
But Matthew McConaughey is fiddling with the books behind the thing. And it's like, and I get it. It was part of the story, but there's a little part of me going, that's not. I saw Robinson Crusoe on Mars, and he never cried no matter how bad it got.
That's right.
That nabbit.
Well, that's what got me. And in real life, that gets me too, because about how those astronauts were, right?
Yeah.
The right stuff guys. Yeah. Well, the latest launch we just saw this last week, everyone was going, they all got to take turns yammering about, the great moment for mankind and bringing everyone together. And it just went on and on and on, all four of them. I would have loved it if just one guy in that whole group, and they got to him. If it was me, it says, okay, Tom, you're up next. And I would say 0G and I feel fine. And stop.
Or just go completely off the NASA script and say space is effing cool and watch everybody pass out.
Right.
It's funny you mention that because, and apologies to people in the audience under 40 who are going, what are these old men talking about? But I've probably watched the launch sequence for Apollo 11, I don't know, 1,000 times, doing transcriptions or whatever. And, Jack King was the guy, met him, interviewed him once, great guy, and he's the one at Kennedy, not at Mission Control. Engines are in chill down. We're at T-minus 5 minutes. Astronauts say the ship feels good, all that. Just doing the facts.
Right.
And did it in a way that was just riveting.
Yeah.
And then when it says, lift off, and that's it. Then you hear the crew. Right. And then with the shuttle era, at about the middle of it, they start with lift off of mission 521C to open new horizons for Toyota lawn mowers or something. And it's like, guys, don't try and make this into a commercial or a public relations moment, but, better or worse.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay. Well, actually, on that note, we got to go.
I talked you out.
I wish we could go another hour.
Yeah.
With you, Rod. It's just absolutely amazing. We will definitely see you at ISDC.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. I got a business track going. I know Michael's going to be there doing stuff probably. And so it's going to be a great, great time.
Well, Michael,
right here in Orlando.
You have a space elevator track, don't you?
I don't. Actually, that's Dr. Pete Swan usually runs that. I got out of the Earth elevator business about 15 years ago. I'm not going to throw my friends under a bus publicly, but I lost confidence in that idea, and I shifted to the moon. So I might do some stuff for the moon at that track now that I'm going. But no, that's Pete Swan. I respect him a lot. He's got a whole cult following that's really dedicated to this idea, and I fingers crossed that they're. I would like to be wrong. I'm not, but I'd like to be wrong.
Okay.
Well, and I think the skeptic in all of us wants to be wrong about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of hope for SpaceX. I have a lot of hope for Duke Glenn. I have a lot of hope for Artemis, which is getting harder and harder to hold on to.
Yeah.
And I want him to succeed.
Yeah.
I really do. And I know we all do.
Yep.
Rod
All right.
Pyle,
I'll see
author,
you in
journalist extraordinaire. We will see you in a couple of months.
Oh,
Thanks
yes.
for being
And
here.
my podcast is called This Week in Space with Tarek Malik,
Yes.
the editor-in-chief at space.com. Lots of fun, almost as much fun as this.
Okay. Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much,
gentlemen.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
See you again.
Bye.
Take care.
All right. See you, Michael. Remember, everyone, our QR code is still up there waiting for you guys to help us out for our space micro grants and a lot of other things that we do here at the center. And I want to tell you, on Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, we have a guy who's a good friend of mine, and he's got a lot of stories to tell about doing space stuff in Australia. Jason Held is with us from Sabre Astronautics. He was actually presented at our 2012 BPC in Southern Cal. And so he's an amazing guy, and you're going to enjoy hearing from him. And we're going to be talking about some plans that we're making for Australia in the end of September. And so from the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.